Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Life After Kids with Doctors Brooke and Lynn. I'm Dr. Brooke.
And I'm Dr. Lynn.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome.
Do you ever feel like somebody was watching you? If you're watching us on YouTube, the dog is staring right at me. Oh my goodness, these dogs. Sorry to distract.
Mabel, Nellie, and Journey here today.
Yes, joining us again today. We apologize in advance for Mabel snoring.
Not apologizing for their cuteness.
No, but the noise. We have a great topic. Well, I don't want to say great, like it's not lighthearted. It's a tough one.
Affects a lot of women though. And we've gotten a lot of questions asking to talk about it.
Yep.
So
this
let's
has
jump
affected
in.
me for sure.
Yeah. Okay. It's around taking care of our parents, taking care of either our grandparents or just people who need caregiving in our lives.
Yes. So we did an episode, actually it just released, but by the time you are hearing this, it will have been out for a while, but it was on forgiveness with parents. And you mentioned then sandwich generation. So touch on that again.
Adults that have at least one living parent.
Yep.
That they're providing care from in some way. Maybe they don't live with you, but you're, responsible for them in some way.
Yep.
And you're also supporting children either emotionally or financially still.
Right. So you're caretaker on both sides.
Exactly.
And sometimes I think it feels like, and I've heard this from so many people, that you just get the kids out of the house and you've got some more freedom to do what you want. And then
excited about looking ahead, and then you've got parents that need you to be there.
And you need to turn to focus on that, right? So it's a tricky thing. And especially I think in today's society, because in the past, very often the families were living under the same roof. Like it wasn't uncommon for older parents to then live with the kids.
I know my grandmother lived with us.
Right. I mean, I know we didn't have that growing up, but I know that like other generations, Ken's family had his great grandmother was in the house, and then his grandmother lived with his mother too. After her husband passed.
When I was younger, I never thought about that as being a big deal. I thought like more the merrier, bring them in.
Yeah.
But as you get older and you know that those things affect your relationship, your romantic relationship, when you have parents under the same roof, it's one more person. It's a lot of moving parts. So it's not as easy or, to just have somebody move.
Right. Well, you have a different perspective when it's your own life. When you're younger, it's like, sure, yeah, I love having grandma around.
Merrier.
Right.
Yeah.
But it is a little bit different now. And I know with in Ken's scenario, and I was just talking to somebody at a Hobart tailgate recently, same type of scenario, that for the grandmother, when the husband passed away, the grandmother of the kids then moved in with her. In Ken's case, it was his grandmother moved in with his mother.
Right.
Because she didn't want to live alone and just stayed. So I think that still happens.
Oh, for sure. Yep. Over 40 million people work as unpaid caregivers for someone age 65 or older.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And what we're kind of talking about today is because those situations are somewhat uncontrollable. You find yourself in them and there's only so much you can do about it. If you have means, there's going to be lots of ways, but not everybody has that. So, these are adults, these are women. If you're out there, you're listening, you probably know this firsthand, that you can be prone to exhaustion and stress and even depression if you're feeling like you don't have that coveted time for yourself like you thought you would, because you're taking care of people who you love that really need you.
Yeah, it's so true. It's a tricky thing. I have an experience with, it wasn't my parents, but with Ken's grandmother, right? So I just mentioned earlier,
and his mother, really. I mean, you were very much
closely connected.
We would have sick too.
Yeah, we would have. So the story is, my husband's an only child. His mother was an only child. When his grandpa passed away, his grandmother moved in with his mother. And then years later, his mother got cancer and ended up very sick, but she was still caretaking for his grandmother, who was by then almost blind. And we lived in New England. They were in Pennsylvania. So we would have been able to do more for Karen as she was ill, except we were out of state. But we still, as far as we were, we did as much as we can. So there was a little bit of that caretaking type thing. But then when Karen passed, we moved his grandmother up to Massachusetts so that we could be her primary caregiver. So even though it wasn't parents, it was still like, here we are taking care of our own kids. And then we have another elderly person who's dependent on us,
Right.
and she passed away last year, just a little over a year ago, but that was 6 years that we had her with us, 7 years. She didn't live in the home. I'm always one to jump in, like, we can do it, Kenny. She needs to be with us. She needs to be under our roof. I can manage all the things. And Kenny's always the voice of reason. It was the conversation was, we have 3 kids and we're already so busy, and she's not going to get the care she needs if she's under our roof. She's
Yeah.
going to be much better she was in an assisted living, right, that was close to us, that we knew was safe,
And
and
they can
that she
dote
was
on
well
her
taken
and-
care of.
Yep.
But that's a hard thing to watch them decline, and just to want to love them as best as you can and meet their needs and do all the things you need
and
to.
I think it's really part of some of the toughest times that we'll go through is watching our parents decline or
Yeah.
get old. And then, couple that with, you could have feelings of guilt because there's only so much of you to go around. You can only do so much. And you could be feeling like, gosh, I wish I wasn't in this situation, and which can then lead to feelings of guilt. So I guess I would just say, just go easy on yourself. There's no right or wrong way to go about this type of situation. Just making sure that you're not, you give yourself plenty of grace and space to rest and feel the way you feel.
Yes. And some of us are wired to be caretakers. And so it may come naturally to some of us more than others. And that doesn't make you a bad person if it doesn't come
That's a
to you
really good
naturally.
point. Yeah. So you should know that they're like, I personally am not that, right? But I know growing up with my mom is a natural caregiver.
Mhm.
And you know these people. These are the people that just love and thrive to take care of other
2 on the
people.
Enneagram.
Yes, number 2 in the
Mhm.
Enneagram. So if that isn't you, release that guilt that you
Yeah.
have about being that person. Because to each their own. We can't be all things to all people.
Right. And that doesn't mean that you just walk away or turn a blind eye.
No.
But it just means, like, you might hear others, and I've talked to women who are like, they just flourish in that space. Not that they want to see their loved ones sick or getting older, but it brings them joy to
And
care for someone.
purpose
It brings them purpose.
and meaning.
It doesn't feel like a chore, where others, we're going to do it because it's the right thing and we love them, but it might not come as naturally, or it might not feel as good.
Exactly. It feels like we want to be doing other things and we can't be.
Yes. And those are the times where you need to lean into what can you do to take good care of yourself, or what things can you put into place to manage it as well as possible, to still show
Absolutely.
up for them in the right way, but also show up for yourself.
Yes. And that's the constructive part of this conversation, is that you have to put on your oxygen mask first.
Yeah.
You have to prioritize self-care,
Yep.
and otherwise you're going to get burned out. You're not going to be at your best, and you're not going to be there for anybody.
100%.
Right? So, and then we can also, just before we dive into that, the little practical things that we can do to take care of ourselves. I think this is really important and worth saying. Work on your own personal planning, whether that would be estate planning or getting coverage that you need. Teach your kids to do it early, putting away for retirement, having a disability policy, or having
Yes.
we have a policy where if we did have to go in long-term living, it would pay for that. Prioritize those things. Even if if it's too late for you, do it so you protect your kids from that. I think that's one of the most really
that's
loving
very,
things
very
that you
important.
can do.
And for yourself, like, if you are looking at it, and I'm going to use the term burden loosely because our family's never a burden to us. But if you don't want to put your child in a situation where they would need to have you in the home or taking care of you or making the decisions, have that plan in place. But also, just from a financial standpoint, I'm here to tell you, based on what we went through with Ken's grandmother, it is not cheap.
Yeah.
If you don't want to be, or you're not, the plan is not to be in a state funded facility, it is
Wildly expensive.
wildly, wildly, wildly expensive. but also worth its weight in gold if you can live out your last years being well
Right.
taken care of with, good,
It's good quality of life,
quality of
standard of
life,
life.
feeling good about standard of life. That's what I'm saying, feeling good about yourself and not you know what I'm
Yes.
saying.
Yeah.
So it's definitely worth it. But if you don't want any of those things to be on your children, we have to, unfortunately,
Yeah, those aren't pleasant
it's
conversations to
not, but
have,
it's also
and it's
things to
money
think
that,
about.
could be used for more fun things like, you know, ATVs and jet skis
You
and
went to
stuff, but
ATVs.
the opposite of what I would want. But still saying it's not
I
fun
know what
money
you
to
meant.
spend.
Right. And here's the other point to that is this is why we harp on taking good care of yourself and moving your body every day and eating well, because we do have a say in what our life is going to look
We do.
like. And what is the sense of living until you're 90 something if you're going to live out your days totally dependent on
Decrepit
somebody else
and
to care for you.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
keep
And
that
our
in mind
parents, and
too.
that's a part of why we're in this place with the sandwich generation, is because people are living longer, which is
Yep.
great news, but our quality of life is debatable as we age, just because when you look around, you don't see a lot of elderly adults. It's not the norm for them to be, thriving and
Yeah.
active. And you have those people, right? And they stand out and they're role
They're
models
amazing.
and they're amazing. So strive to be one of them. And that just means you gotta, do some things now to help you get there.
Yep.
So, all right, let's going back to the self-care though, because I think that's the most constructive place we can come
Yep.
talk to you today. If you are taking care of a loved one, is you really, it's difficult because I think you get in that place where, especially if you are a caregiver, it's like putting someone else's needs ahead of yourself. As a mom, we've been doing that. It's so natural. But yourself, I mean, we're sitting here and we're just here to tell you that you can't, unless you're taking care of yourself, you can't be there to take care of someone
Right.
else. So instead of turning on the TV, I know it's like time becomes of the essence, right? Because you're doing things for other people, but instead of just flopping down on the couch, take a walk. So practical. Feel your feelings, don't numb them.
Yep.
Feel the guilt, come to terms with it. It's okay. Some of it's natural.
Mhm.
Where you're feeling, where you're at is probably okay. I mean, no, we didn't envision this getting in this place. And it can be sad to think about. So feel that. Exercise to get stronger. That's a really good place to put your energy on something tangible that you can get a good result out of. If you have 20 or 30 minutes, go walk on a treadmill and at an incline. I
Yep.
mean, just do something that makes you feel stronger emotionally or
And to keep
physically.
you also that will keep you healthy moving on and even give you the strength you need to help take care of
Yes,
your
it's
loved
going to
one.
help with your energy levels.
Yep.
It's absolutely
Yep.
just all encompassing, right? And then try and use all the available resources in your community. So I'm not personally well versed on this, but when I was doing a little bit of research on it, if you have a child, maybe you have a disabled adult child, right?
Yep.
Use respite care. We may or may not know of respite care, but respite is there provided by the government for weekends, for breaks
Yep.
for moms and caregivers.
Yes.
Use that. Try not to feel guilty about
It's such
it.
a great
Very
service.
likely, they're going to get something from you that is beneficial and enriching to
Yeah.
their life
Yeah.
on those days. There are programs that will pay you as a caregiver. There are tax credits for caregiving. Ask your tax preparer, your accountant, or your tax professional, how to get help for taking care of loved ones. Use meal delivery services. And then I just wrote this down, area agency on aging. I think those are, again, government services where there's people out there. They may not have all your answers, but just, I think instead of feeling overwhelmed or despaired, go get the things you can take from these resources, use what's applicable, and, make the best of the situation.
Yes. And I think, and just a couple, I love all those. And then beyond self-care for yourself, which is obviously so important, and all those points that you brought up, because you're no good to anybody else if you can't get through your day physically. And I know that the hard way because I got myself so wrapped around the axle and like completely burnt out in the process of just trying to do all the things for Mimi that I had to take a step back for a little bit and get healthy. I mean, I was just in a really, really, really bad place when she first moved here. It was not good at all. Um, but I think there's some practical things that we can do too, just to make like there are things that come up. Like, for example, what are you gonna do? You want to keep the loved one in the home with you, or is it a better option to put them in assisted living? Is it a better option to put them in independent living? And
Mhm.
then there's nursing homes. So navigating those things, I would say definitely, if you're keeping them in the home, the benefits of that is that it's probably going to be more cost effective if you have the capability to take care of them on your own.
Yep.
If you have to bring somebody in your house daily to take care of them, that's going to get more pricey. But the question there is, how is that? What is your stress level and your ability to live your life worth? If you have the means, it might be better to have them out of the house just so that you can function, because that's a big deal to have them in the house and you be the caretaker all the time,
Yeah.
right? So, and you shouldn't feel guilty about that if you need to put them somewhere else. And we started Mimi out with independent living, which is basically they're in a facility where they have their own sort of apartment or studio,
Mhm.
right? And they do all the things for themselves. They're capable of taking care of themselves, but they have all of their meals in a dining hall. It's provided for them. Their social system set up. They're safe because somebody's always checking in
Yep.
on them. They could have a car, but they don't have to have one because they've got public transportation that takes them everywhere they need to go.
Hey, that sounds like a good time.
I mean, these women where Mimi started out, they were amazing. They were out walking together. It was
Sounds like
unbelievable. And I think,
if you looked at it as a community like of people living together, I mean, I don't
yeah,
know what's not to like about that. I mean,
it's,
obviously,
yeah.
it's not for everybody, but
No, but
it
it
sounds
in
fun.
the funny thing, the ironic, I'll say, is the manager of that place was telling us once that they started out with it thinking it would be a place for like late 60s into the 70s. And it turned out it was all these people in their late 80s, even into their 90s, that were just
Mhm.
healthy. They couldn't be on their own
Yep.
anymore, but they were
They
just
needed a
flourishing
bridge. Yep.
with each other. We talk a
That's
lot
great.
about connection and community. And this is another thing for you to think about if you're feeling guilty about them going into a home, because what you're going to find is, if you haven't already, the pushback, if they're in their own home and they've been independent, but they've gotten
They
to a
want to
place where
stay.
it's not safe. Oh my goodness, the pushback with them leaving their home can be so hard. I mean, it can turn into a fight, but to take some of the guilt away, hopefully, if they go into an independent living or an assisted living, there's something to be said for the connection and community. We talk about how
So
important this
true.
is
So true.
to
I
emotional
wonder
health.
for their perspective if they think about it, like the reason for the pushback is because like that's sort of like an end stage plan,
Yeah.
so you're staring down the inevitable
Well, nobody wants to feel like they're losing their independence, right?
as well. Yeah.
And I think you feel comfortable in your own home.
Yeah.
And, there's something to be said for, I did a post about this with us moving and going through old memories. There's something to be said about the connection you feel to the memories in the past being in your place.
Mhm.
So I get it, but that's a good way to paint that light, new friendships, new things to do. And it might just be a hurdle that they're upset initially, but once they get there, they end up really enjoying it. Assisted living would be more for somebody who needs more help and can't do everything on their own. They might need somebody to come in to give them their medications. They might need maybe someone to just help them around a little bit, check in on them more often. And then when you get to nursing home level, that's where you can't, like, you're having trouble getting dressed,
Medications.
right.
Yeah.
And a lot of
Short-term care.
times the nursing home could even be a little bit less because a lot of that is funded because it's really necessary
Yeah.
medically.
It's one step away from a
Yeah.
hospital situation.
Yep. And then you can also choose independent living, but have somebody come in that you pay outside of that you like, an independent contractor
Mhm.
that's a healthcare provider that goes in from time to time. Maybe it's a couple times a week just to check on them, to
Yeah.
help them with different things. So
If you
there
have
can
the
be like
means,
sort
that's
of
a
right.
great
You can have sort
bridge.
of a balance of, they're not quite ready for assisted living, but that's a good option, that they're independent, but they need a little extra help.
Yeah.
So those are all things to think through. But, it's such a tricky thing because I watched this Mimi. She was wanted to come. We let her make the choice, and I think anytime you can let them make the decision, they're going to feel better about it because that's one of the hardest struggles is just feeling a sense of loss of control over your life when you still, especially if you're still mentally with it. But she made the decision. She wanted to come to Boston to be with us. But then you have situations where both of my grandmothers fought and were so upset when their children ended up moving them from their house, but it was not a safe environment for them, but they were just beyond upset about it. Beyond upset. I mean, like really
Took it
had,
out really terrible.
yeah, didn't do well. And then, they got over it, but it's just things to think about. And it can be really tough. And if you're in that place, my heart goes out to you
Well,
because
yeah,
it's
I
very
think if you're
stressful.
the parent in that situation, the elderly parent, I think you have to think about what's best for your kids. And, yes, you would want to stay and you want to hold on to your independence, but what kind of stress are you creating for the people that you raised, to now worry about you all the time?
Yeah.
So I think it needs to be less about you at that point.
I mean, that's a
I'm
good
always
argument,
gonna
but
come from that place.
yeah, I'll be reminding you of that when it's time to put you.
Right. Some of this perspective is, and one of the
Easier to
reasons,
say.
right. And one of the reasons why I hesitate. I mean, these are all such great topics that people suggest, but I want to come from a place of experience because that's where I can provide the most value.
Mhm.
Right. And so, if you're listening and you're going through this, hopefully you got something valuable from it. Or I think I think it's just important to feel like you're not alone and you are connected to other women who are
Mhm.
taking care of parents. Um, but it's something very likely that you won't understand until you're in it.
No, I don't think you do. And you don't until you're in it in the stress of just
And maybe
wondering
if
if
it's
they're
your parents
okay.
too, like no slouch on the fact that it was Ken's because that's your husband, you love
Yeah,
him, but that wasn't your parent as well. It could even be that extra layer if it's your parents.
absolutely. I can only imagine. And I think another word of advice and problems that I see arise is when, hopefully in a perfect world, if a parent gets to the place where they need to be taken care of either in your home or outside of the home, when there's more than one sibling, but they all don't want to help and it's all left to one person,
Uh,
that can be super
that gets
tricky. So
messy.
I feel like the more proactive you can be and the more open in communication you can be, even early on before you get to that situation with your siblings, to make sure that you're all in the same place
That's a
and
whole nother
all.
podcast because you've
It
got
is, but
your
this is,
caregivers that are going to rise to the occasion and everybody else in the family is like, well, so-and-so is just really
yeah,
good at that. And then you got your over functioners, the people who are just gonna, well, nobody else is doing this, so I'm gonna
yeah.
step up and be responsible, usually your firstborn. But it shouldn't, that can tear families apart. That can really create a lot of hurt.
Oh my gosh, I've seen it play out
Yeah.
so many times. In our situation, it was just Ken, so we didn't have that. But it is tricky when I've seen it with friends that just, the animosity there because they felt like they did more. They were just so overextended, but they weren't getting help. So just be mindful that if you're in that situation,
Yeah.
and maybe you're not the one that's doing all the help that maybe you need to hear this because maybe you need to step up a little bit. And I would just encourage you that if you are somebody that is a caretaker for an elderly parent or an elderly person right now, and you feel like you're having a day where you're at the end of your rope, which I was at occasionally, and I say that lightly because we didn't have Mimi in our home and we had a lot of help, but there
You
were
were
days that were,
saying it was still very
because
tough.
she would be, I mean, this is probably, if you've experienced this yet, if any of you have experienced, you will know that there are days that they're miserable and they take their anger and frustration
Mhm.
out on you. And that's a hard pill to
Yeah.
swallow, right? Because you just, like
There's
in
no,
fairness to them, they're just, I mean,
they're
imagine
not
putting
feeling
yourself in their
good.
shoes, but it doesn't feel good to be treated that
Right.
way. And it's, a little bit tricky, but I would just encourage you that to the extent that you can, as you said earlier, take good care of yourself and try to be grateful where you can
Hmm.
for the time that you have. And just keep in mind that it's sadly, it's not something that's going to go on forever. And just try to be present and make the most of it because when that person has left this earth, you will be so happy for the time that you did have and the time that you were able to spend. And even if it's just fleeting moments, because unfortunately, a lot of these elderly people have dementia too, so even if it's just a fleeting moment, hold on to those moments while you can, because that's what you'll have after the time has passed. That sounds really sad, but it's
No,
an
that
important
was a really
perspective to
great
have.
place to bring this around to
Yeah.
finishing up. That was, yeah, just, these are situations we can't control. So what can we hold on to that is a healthy, that will keep us in a healthy place and, help us to not have any regrets afterward,
Yes.
you know,
And
because heavier than any of it is the feelings of guilt and regret and being disappointed with ourselves for
yeah.
not handling it well.
Yes. And by the way, if that's how you're feeling, you've got to let that go, because you can't be all things all the time to everyone. None of us are perfect. Give yourself a little bit of grace. We just,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. It
that's
is
a
tough.
really, really, I, I mean, I could talk on this subject forever, because it's a tough place to be. And it wasn't even my parent. So I can imagine somebody's heart, the way they're feeling
Yeah.
going through that I'm watching my mom with my grandmother right now, who has dementia and is just in such a bad place. And but it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It is absolutely heartbreaking, but you still have to choose to show up every day, because it's your family and because you love them.
It's the right thing to
And we
do.
need to treat other people like,
Yep.
I would hope that however we care for our family or parents, whoever it is how we'll be cared for if we ever get to that place, right? Like,
It
I
goes
think that's
around,
always
and I think you're setting an example for your kids
right.
and being gracious and selfless and all of the things. And then try and do your best to make preparations and plans to avoid as much of it as you can. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's really the most selfless thing that you can do for your
Right.
kids.
And by the way, one last thing that I will mention, if you have somebody who is in your home, or in assisted living, independent, whatever it is, you could also, to your point, there are many local nonprofit organizations that offer all kinds of services that are free of charge. And in particular, you can reach out to local churches, because we had people that came in. Mimi was Catholic, so they would come in and give her like communion and different things like that. But beyond that, they had like families through the church, like a father and a young girl that would come in and see her once a week, and the little girl would bring things that she made for her, and she'd sit on her lap. And just like, there are so many different things if you look for them, and that's a great way. We talk about is the word leverage that I'm looking for. Like, if you're in a situation and you can't do all the things, well, what can you pass off, right?
Yeah.
Is that the word I'm
Yeah,
looking for? Leverage. So in those situations, in order for you not to get to the place of burnout because you're trying to do all the things, you need to look for these other resources where you don't have to be the person doing it, but you can still be providing love and care for that person.
absolutely.
So definitely don't feel like you have to do it all yourself, I think, is my point.
Yeah. I think that we can be, some of us can get to that place of like being martyrs, not murders, martyrs
Yeah.
or heroes. And
Yeah.
that's hurting nobody, helping nobody, but it's hurting you.
No, and if you're trying to do that and you get yourself worn up, likely you're not showing up well
Right.
for your loved one either, because you're probably a little cranky, you're probably a little snippy, right? It's very hard to maintain that level of care and concern when it's falling on you all day long. I mean, if they're living in their home still, but they need care. I've had plenty of friends whose loved one was in their own home, but they were going over there every single day for whatever they needed to do. Maybe it would be even just, I'm going to use the example of groceries, because maybe you can look into groceries can be delivered now.
Yep.
So maybe you can look into a grocery delivery system. I mean, there's so many different things. And also, if you're somebody that's not in this situation, but you're looking for more purpose, you're not sure what to do next, you want to contribute, maybe you're the person that's going to connect with a family that needs you to be the one that
Like
goes
that
and
man
sits
and
with
his
their loved
daughter.
one.
Absolutely. Especially if you are a caregiver and
Especially
you
if you
do
are a
thrive in
caregiver,
that.
what a
You should be
blessing
doing
to another
more of
human.
that,
Yeah,
because like you said, it's such a blessing and you get blessed by it as
absolutely.
well. So
Absolutely.
hopefully we did some service there and provided some value and you get to share your experience and
Yeah, I think there were we did a poll on our story asking what our
Mhm.
community wanted to hear about. And a couple of people asked about,
Yeah.
taking care of elderly parents.
It's it's a
That's a
tricky
tough,
thing. Yep.
yeah, I mean, we could talk, there's just so much to unpack there. So I hope we did it some justice.
I think we did.
Um, anyway, anything
Good.
else that you have to add?
No.
Okay. I thought you were going to say something snarky.
No.
If you're hearing snoring, this is not Dr. Lynn's heavy breathing. It's her dog. I think I mentioned at the start. She's really bad right now.
Yeah, Frenchies just have that short nose and she's a snorer.
Yep.
My husband doesn't snore, but my dog does.
Oh, my husband is a snorer. Anyway. Okay, this is
Thanks
what
for
I get
being
for
here,
wearing my
guys.
hearing aids because now I can hear her too much.
That's right. It doesn't even register.
I know, it doesn't phase you. Anyway, now I've gone off on a tangent, and if you didn't know before, now you all know that I wear hearing aids. um, Ladies, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. If you have anything to add or input, DM us. Let us know. There are other women that are going through this and asking for the help. That's why I love our membership community because we can all pull
100%.
from each other's strengths and know we're not alone and we can all give input on these topics. Their genius is, what do you say? 1 + 1 = 11.
Batched brilliance.
Batched brilliance. Yes, I love it.
Together we're brilliant.
Yep. Thank you for joining us for another episode. I feel like I need to go take a hot bath now. This was a
I need a
tough
nap.
conversation.
And a bath.
Brings up a lot of,
Yeah, probably memories for
Yep.
you.
Yep.
Yeah.
But thank you for joining us. Make sure you're following us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Did I miss one? We've got the private Facebook group. I think that's at YouTube. If you prefer to watch this instead of listen, you can check out our website at www.lifeafterkids.com for all of our free resources and to get to more podcast episodes. And other than that,
Thanks, ladies. Go
Ha-
take care of yourself. Take care of
Yes.
yourself first.
absolutely. Put on that oxygen mask.
That's right.